Welcome everyone. We are very pleased to have with us Mr. Vikas Vasal. He is National Tax Leader, Grant Thornton. Mr. Vikas, let's start with the most talked about question. What changes we can expect in this upcoming budget for the common man?
So there are a lot of expectations from the budget in terms of certain tax concessions or benefits to be doled out for the common man, especially because they have stood with the government post the demonetization drive, where we saw long queues before the banks and the ATMs to get the money. And in general, most of the surveys have displayed that common man has supported a demonetization move. Therefore, it is expected that couple of things we may see in the budget this year. First, in terms of the effective tax rate going slightly down for the people at the lower slab rates. Now, there are two options over there. One, either you increase the slab rates, second, or you reduce the effective tax rate over there, which is 10%, 20%, 30%. To my mind, a better option could be to reduce the effective tax rate within the existing slab rates, for the simple reason that if we increase the slab rates, then many of the taxpayers will go out of the tax net, which is not a good sign. Second, there is a lot of expectation that medical reimbursement limits, which are 15,000, have been fixed about 15 years back. They should be revised upwards. If we take a simple example of a family of 4 people or 6 people, I think 15,000 are not economically justifiable in the present day scenario. Third, there is expectation that interest reduction on housing loan may be revised upwards, especially for the first time home buyers. It makes a lot of sense because housing sector has been seeing a lot of downturn and it feeds into the steel and cement industry and others, and also provides a lot of employment opportunities for the unskilled and skilled labor. Therefore, interest reduction on housing loan can also go up. ATC has always been a demand. It's doubtful whether this will be increased this year or not. So these are a couple of suggestions which we could see in the budget 2017.
What do you expect about standard deduction? Do you think that it will make a comeback in this union budget?
It's a very interesting question. If we go by the government's stated philosophy that the various tax concessions which are there in the budget right now, they should be phased out, and that we have seen in the last 2 budgets, wherein a lot of tax concessions have been put to end, or a roadmap has been laid out when they will end gradually over a period of time. What has not been touched mainly is in terms of the limited tax benefits which are still available for the individual taxpayer, especially the salaried taxpayer. Therefore, there is a thought that most of the tax incentives, whether it is LTA, medical reimbursements, or meal coupons, etc., they have lost their economic significance today and do not provide any real benefit. Therefore, an option could be to do away with all these benefits and instead introduce a special benefit in the form of standard deduction, maybe 30,000 or maybe 50,000, depending on what calculations we do in terms of tax benefit loss. So standard deduction may see a comeback, but for that we will have to give away all other tax concessions.
Moving on, do you think India is ready for GAR?
I think it's a very debatable question whether India is ready or not. But if you look at it, there has been a lot of sensitivity and publicity surrounding GAR. GAR has been tried to be rolled out earlier also, but because of the popular demand and various representations, it has been held back. I think we have reached a stage where more or less people are aware and to some extent prepared about the GAR regime. Of course, in the initial years, to my mind, I think it has to be introduced with a liberal hand, that certain issues or conflicts which are arising in the initial few years should be dealt with a soft touch. Having said that, there are a couple of points on GAR which require clarification, and that is very important. First and foremost, whether GAR will override the treaty, especially where the tax treaties contain some anti-abuse provisions. For example, if a particular tax treaty does contain a limitation of benefit clause, then I think there should be a clarity that if the conditions mentioned in the LOB clause are met, GAR should not apply. Similarly, where specific anti-avoidance rules are there, either under the domestic tax law or have been specifically provided, a case in point is the BEPS regime, If some of the action plans of BEPS are being implemented, then I think even in those scenarios, GAR should not apply. GAR has to be applied in extreme and extreme situations, and it should be an exception rather than a rule. Otherwise, it will become another cause of concern and long drawn litigation, which we all want to avoid, as we want to send a message to the investors at large that India is a country which means business now.
So my next question is, do you think there will be any announcements in the upcoming budget to curb further generation of black money?
There is a lot of expectation and couple of steps the government has already taken. Some of the measures could be whether as part of the finance bill or otherwise. One, there certain concessions have been rolled out in terms of use of digital modes of payment, for example, petrol pump payments and others. The list may be widened, number one. Number two could be there's a talk about some tax being introduced in terms of cash transactions, two ways. One, whenever you buy or sell anything, any good or service and make the payment by cash, there could be an additional tax which could be levied. Another way could be that when you are depositing money into the bank account or you are withdrawing money exceeding a specified limit, again the cash transaction tax could come. The whole idea is that with so many means and measures available for the common man today, leaving aside the rural population, I think there is very less need for people to actually use the cash. And the younger generation that we have is more tech savvy, more digital savvy. So I think there will be a couple of measures announced in the budget, either as part of the finance bill or otherwise.
Moving further, there is always a dispute and allowability of vacancy allowance under the head house property. So do you think that this budget will provide clarity on this issue?
I think this also has been a long pending demand that if a person has more than one house and it is lying vacant, whether deemed rental income should be taxed or not. Government's philosophy has been, and that's also a right way of looking at the assets which the country generates or country has, to put all the assets to a meaningful use so that they become productive assets. If a house is lying vacant, then it is always an issue that it is neither being let out nor being used for any other purpose. Therefore, there has been a challenge on that. I have my doubts whether some announcements will come in, but there is an expectation on that also, that more than one house there should be certain concessions in terms of deemed to be let out. But again, going by the basics of taxation philosophy, if an asset is lying idle, it has to be put to effective use. Otherwise, there has to be some tax element attached to it. So we may or may not see. I'm not in very much favor of not letting it tax if the asset is lying idle.
One last question. Do you think that ICDS will be deferred in this upcoming union budget?
This is a demand, I think, which has been raised in all the industry forums and all the representations which have been made to the government. Post introduction of Ind AS and ICDS, first there is a dichotomy between the various underlying provisions of Ind AS and ICDS. And I think the industry is not very well prepared. Number three, there are certain inherent lacunae within the ICDS also which require a lot of clarification. So I feel that ICDS should be deferred or scrapped completely, and we should focus more on the Ind AS side. If they are not scrapped, at least they should be deferred and reworked upon.
Mr. Vikas, many thanks for participating in this budget talk.